Welcome back to Shat on TV Game of Thrones edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the queen of all HBO shows, Game of Thrones. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And this is our fan mail episode where we look back on this week's Game of Thrones and provide our feedback on the top listener emails and voicemail for the week. This week's episode was entitled The Last of the Starks. You spent an hour listening to our ideas on Tuesday's deep dive. Now it's our turn to hear from you.
Yeah, I think each week the listeners outdo themselves with the quality of their writing. But I feel from online, from Twitter, social media, the emails we're getting, it seems to be two factions of fans, and both are just ready to explode. It's like a powder keg.
Yeah, I've seen comments on YouTube and Twitter, people saying that we're pandering and we're afraid to criticize the show. We're being completely honest here, and I think we've been pretty balanced about it. But the audience, if we're kind of the centrists, they're definitely the extreme camps. It's a love it or hate it sort of thing.
Yeah, we're getting hate mail from both sides. Oh, you guys pander. If you got, some of them say like, why do we even watch the show? Because you hate it. I'm like, are they listening to us?
Yeah, or that we're in like HBO's pocket, which no, we're not, but we would be.
No, hell yeah. We just send us an email, HBO. We'll be a shill for the show.
But we're loving the passion that's coming in. It makes our job so much easier, and especially for this small council, we do take the time to read every single email that's sent to us, listen to every single voicemail that's sent into us, and we go through a very deep voting process and debate over each one to decide on the 20 or so that we can get into each episode. Again, if your email or voicemail does not make the pod, that doesn't mean that we've just tossed it away. It will be on the website, shatontv.com, under the Game of Thrones Small Council section. And I'm personally responding to every single one. I've started that job. It may take until after the podcast is over, but we're going to keep tearing through those as fast as we can. And we appreciate all the listeners, all the people writing in. And there's a certain group of people who have gone even above and beyond that. And that's people who have made financial contributions. And we don't like to spend a lot of time talking about the money side of the podcast, but we just wanted to take a few seconds to say thank you to all the people who have taken the time to go on shatontv.com /Venmo /Amazon /PayPal and contribute a few bucks to help us keep the lights on, pay for our hosting fees, pay for our website fees, and our audio processing fees. So just going to go through those really quickly. Adam F., Adam R., Ashley Schlafly, of course, from the Dana Buckler Show, Carl Watson, Carmelita Valdez McCoy, who is a longtime contributor and regular contributor, Catherine T., Charles R., Christopher M., De Rigueur Designs, Emily J., Holly N., Jamie H., Joanne M., Jordan B., Mac M., Martin L., Matthew M., Rachel B., Rebecca L., Sarah W., Steve V., Valerie F., Jared C., Joseph S., Matt C., Mitch P., Naja J., and last but not least, Sean F. Guys, all of you, thank you so much for the contributions. Again, we make no money doing this, so these contributions go directly to the cost of making the podcast, and we are deeply in your debt.
Yeah, and people would be surprised because now we're up to, I think, 6 feeds for the shows and the movies. Each month, the cost just compounds. It just keeps rolling and growing. So whether you give a couple bucks, whether you give a lot of money, I mean, we've had contributions where somebody gives $200. That is fantastic. But every dollar counts. It keeps us going because I can get my wife to let me have the time away from my family. But if I start taking money out of the little that we have to finance this above what we did in the beginning, I think that would be pushing it. So you guys really do help us keep going. And this will carry us through, hopefully, the year. And we really want to say thank you.
Yeah, just an example is just today, King B and I were talking about doing The Watchmen. HBO is going to be putting out The Watchmen this fall. We're very excited about it. And King B is like, it'd be great is if we got annotated copies of The Watchmen. Now, we've all read the graphic novel, but to have them to have all the notes from Alan Moore and have a deeper dive into The Watchmen so we can all get through it. So when we are watching the show, even though it's tails off from the book, we have a base to go from. And normally we wouldn't even think about it. We just pay out of pocket. But that stuff, it adds up. So it is helpful to have a little bit of help financially, and we appreciate all you do. Now that we've pissed off everybody on YouTube, and they've all left comments about the fact that we sold out and that why are these guys taking 3 minutes to talk about money? We should probably get to the show. So Big D, this one is going to be jam-packed. We're going to attempt to go through more emails than we've ever done for Game of Thrones. So without further ado, take us to the small council.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
All right, you guys wrote in about a ton of topics, but the one that seemed to be on everyone's mind, the most popular topic this week, was about the killing of dragons, and specifically the Scorpion 2.0. And we'll start off with an email from Matthew Colson, who writes in, the leaders of the armies in the north make every military mistake possible, but still pull out the win against a bazillion undead. Then, when Daenerys is told, hey, we need a breather, she just ignores it. Huh? Her forces were decimated on the heels of terrible strategy, so her answer is more terrible strategy. Forced. Okay, well, at least they're going to do some recon on their plan, right? You know, to make sure they know where Euron's fleet is or where the Lannister and the Golden Company's armies are, right? I mean, we don't want to lose another dragon. Better actually think past our noses this time. Nope. Let's just guess and hope for the best, because without forcing the worst decisions ever, we couldn't then force a dragon death, followed by the drama of Daenerys losing the confidence of everyone and seemingly losing her shit. Good thing Missandei swam right over to Euron's fleet so we could get to see her get Ned Starked, which would inflame Team Targaryen to make more bad decisions. Not forced at all. So far, the highlight of the season has been the episode where everyone just sat around talking, and I hate that I think that. All the best, Matthew M. Colson.
So Matthew, one of the things I'll address, on my second watch, when they first start getting the Scorpion 2.0 attacks on the fleet, Grey Worm says, get Missandei into a dinghy. So they at least tried to explain how they captured her so easy, because she was the only one in a boat. But I agree with you. They are taking some shortcuts. It's almost like they said, the battle is too lopsided. They have way too much of an advantage. So we need to at least cut half the force. We need to kill a dragon. Let's make it happen. So they said, all right, let's have the Dothraki just charge into the night. No recon. Just send the dragons out there having a nice, relaxing flight. They got to get us to the end. If we had more time, I'm sure they would have done it the right way.
So listener Fred from Birmingham, Alabama wrote in with a different take on it. He says, hey guys, I imagine you're going to get more than a few emails like this, but will someone tell me what the fuck is Euron's deal? This is the second time he's shown up completely out of the blue to ambush a rival naval fleet, but how does he always know where his enemies are going to be? As far as I can tell, we've heard nothing that would hint at him being strategically ahead of the game or some kind of tactical genius. He's just a ruthless-ass warrior. Is there someone on the inside feeding him information? Was he just posting outside Dragonstone waiting for someone to show up? Does it have anything to do with the drowned god? I'm clueless. Hopefully there's a solid answer to this, because otherwise it feels like some sloppy writing to me. Really enjoyed watching the season with you guys. I know I'm going to be heartbroken when we see our finale in 2 weeks. And that's Fred from Birmingham, Alabama.
Well, Euron's his command ship is called the Silence. I think that works at night, but I don't know how you could sneak up 15, 20 ships out in the open sea. I don't know how he does it. Maybe there's got to be some explanation.
I mean, we talked in the deep dive about how there might be a spy or something like that, but it's reasonable to think there's not much distance between Dragonstone and King's Landing. It could happen that he was on some sort of a patrol, which wouldn't really explain being in a stealth position, but maybe they just anticipated if the sort of forces were going to come south, Daenerys would logically be going to Dragonstone. What I don't understand is why they went to Dragonstone without Sir Davos. Like, he's like your most experienced sailor. He's not on any of the ships. Right. He's lived on Dragonstone. He's a smuggler. You don't take him. You're like, hey, Sir Davos, you're on the King's Road. Get on a horse. No more boats for you.
But one of the things I learned from our Taboo podcast, these are big sails. These are big, like, clipper ships. They require wind. They take time to get underway. Yes, it makes sense that you could ambush them at Dragonstone because they were dropping anchors. But you see Daenerys coming, you're like, okay, everybody pull up your sails. This is like a 35, 40-minute job just to get underway and up to speed. Somehow he does that pretty quick.
Thanks, Fred. We also had one from Elias who wrote in and said, hey, guys, if the ever so calculating Bronn was betting on the Northern Army, shouldn't he have warned Tyrion and Jaime about the hundreds of new Scorpion 2.0 ballistas that were built in preparation for a new war?
I think it would have made sense.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're a betting man, this doesn't mean you have to leave everything to chance. Help him out a little bit, Bronn.
Yeah, it's amazing. They get so much intel so fast, yet nobody told them they were building these giant crossbows out in plain sight on the top of King Landing's wall.
Now, another guy named Jon Not Snow wrote in, and he's defending the Scorpions. He says, I love the spectacle of the Battle of Winterfell, but this episode is Game of Thrones. The politics, machinations, and human interest with a touch of violence that had me focused on every word. Rhaegal going down caught me by surprise, and for everyone calling bullshit on Euron shooting him down, is anyone familiar with naval battles in history? The big guns of World War II could fire over 20 miles at sea. No computers, no satellites, just a team of gunners, geometry, and skill. Battle of Leyte Gulf, ships doing 25 knots, zigzagging and firing on targets doing the same. People accept an arrow hitting a dragon, but a Scorpion XL launched by people who have clearly had time to train? Yes, very realistic. And that comes from Jon Not Snow.
So I thought about a deficiency today in the Scorpion's design. They mounted them all in the very front of the ship. All the ships are in a line sailing straight. You know what's between the Scorpions and the back of the ships? These giant black sails. If the dragons had come up from behind, you can't turn the Scorpion around and see anything coming. It's all obscured by fabric. I think it might have been smart at least to mount maybe one or two Scorpions on the back of a few ships, so at least you can cover both sides.
Well, another listener, Vernon Babbage, wrote in about the practicality of the Scorpions themselves. He says, watching episode 4, I was trying to determine if it's possible to pierce a dragon's exterior using a bolt from as far away as the ships were. Do we know how tough their exterior really is? Do we know if these wooden constructed Scorpions can even handle the reaction force of launching a projectile with that much energy? I tried to use a calculator from longrods.ch. I assumed the dragons were as hard as copper and the rod was solid steel traveling at a whopping 500 feet per second, but that wasn't enough. Based on how ridiculously close the fleet was and the flight time, the bolts may have been even slower than that. I read a post from user Froka Roka on Reddit who did the math and determined the Scorpions are physically impossible. Basically, are there any assumptions we may have incorrect on the speed of the projectiles, materials, or dragon's toughness? And that comes from Vernon Babbage.
Okay, so Vernon is the reason for this podcast. Most people watch the show, then come Monday morning, they want to talk around the water cooler. Which one of your coworkers is going to bust out the calculation to see if this actually works? Without Vernon, none of you guys would have known this.
Well, there was a meme circulating around Facebook and Twitter this week with George R.R. Martin saying that a mature dragon is virtually impossible to kill. A mature dragon in the sky, like nothing can take it down. And there's one record of a flying dragon being killed by a projectile, and it was one that was hit, I believe, in the eye, and it was a 1 in a million shot. So definitely on the show, the dragon is not as powerful a weapon as it was in the novels. And we can just accept that.
Yeah.
And on one final note, listener Stephen Whitcomb had an actually for me. I said, hey guys, I'd just like to point out that you said the dragon got hit twice. Actually, it got hit with 3 bolts. Love the show. Keep up the good work, Stephen Whitcomb. So Stephen, you just proved my point even further. 3 is even tougher than 2.
Dude, but fuck 3. On the second time I watched it, yes, the first 3 are direct hits. I mean, on the vital spots. And then the 4th bolt almost got Daenerys. So the likelihood of them hitting it was amazing. But the fact that they were almost 4 for 4 is a little unbelievable.
And a lot of people wrote in, they're like, why didn't Daenerys circle up and then rain fire down on him? And she thought about it, but also you got to think about the fact that her child basically just died. She's not having a great time. She's emotionally wounded. She almost got killed. I think I probably would have pulled away from the fight too. You know, take your dragon, live to fight another day.
Yeah, and she'd also lose her cool nickname. If she loses the last dragon, nobody's calling her the Dragon Queen. You know, she's not as cool anymore, you know, going around Westeros.
She's Mrs. Jon Snow. Nobody wants to be that.
Yeah, Stormborn, come on.
Now, speaking of Daenerys, we had several people write in about the madness or alleged madness that Daenerys is experiencing. Big D, you laid out a great case for it in Tuesday's deep dive. Let's start off with the Mad Queen herself, Maddie Devine, who wrote in and said, Dany has been Azor Ahai, or the princess who was promised. She forged Lightbringer, the dragons, by tempering the blade, birthing the dragons, in the blood of her lover, Khal Drogo's funeral pyre. And then she has a reference to the prophecy, when the red star bleeds and the darkness gathers, Azor Ahai shall be born again amid smoke and salt to wake dragons out of stone. Salt and smoke, the red comet, yada, yada, yada. Jon Snow doesn't even come close. Daenerys has finally been betrayed 3 times. Once for blood was Miri Mazdur. That was the woman who patched up Khal Drogo and then offered Daenerys the out, which ended up killing her unborn child as well. Once for gold was Jorah, and now once for love is Jon, for the love of his family. This is bringing her to the depth of the shadow. I was a believer that Tyrion would be the one to betray her, but he has kept faith in ways that amaze me and redeem him. I think he is also going to play a big part in the completion of Quaith's prophecy. And the prophecy says, to go north, you must first journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Here, it is quite simple to debunk the first 3 lines, as she had to go to King's Landing prior to Winterfell, conquer Meereen before the Iron Throne, and had to travel all the way back to the beginning to get a Khalasar from Vaes Dothrak before she could move forward. The phrase that was hard to reckon with was the last, shall pass beneath the shadow before seeing the light. There was talk that the shadow that she had to pass beneath is actually Drogon's, but I think the shadow is a dark period. So she is now returning to isolation and aloneness in which she started the show as scared and alone before she can see the light, which in this case would be a revelation of what her personal destiny really is. I also think Pass Beneath the Shadow is a reference to her family's history, the biases that we viewers and the people in her world project on her as a result of what we know about her father and brother. Quite simply, we are doubting her, but she doesn't need us or Jon. She only needs faith in herself. And if anyone knows that your family doesn't dictate you as a person, it's Tyrion, and I think he'll have a role to play in reminding her of that. Cheers, Maddie Devine.
Yeah, I like that. I think that she could escape, and I mentioned it when I did the rundown of Daenerys, her history, that if she can escape from the shadow of her father's madness and the common people's expectation that the Targaryens can't be trusted, and they all will inevitably, no matter how much they seem to be a benevolent leader, that they will devolve into madness, I think that's a nice parallel, and I can buy into that.
Now, Big D, in response to the deep dive, listener Travis wrote in and said, it's a bit disingenuous to mark Daenerys in the same light as a legitimate nut job. The smirk and the smile you cite only occurs in one scene, and the rest of the time, Daenerys is punishing her enemies, mostly slavers and rebel lords, in war. Is Tyrion mad for using wildfire at Blackwater? Is Stannis mad for sacrificing Shireen? Is Tywin, Walder, and Roose mad for orchestrating the Red Wedding? Is Sansa mad for feeding Ramsay to dogs? Is Arya mad for poisoning all the men of House Frey? I've never heard those moments described as madness or those characters described as mad. Why should Daenerys be treated differently? And that comes from Travis.
So, Travis, I think I actually gave 2 other examples. One that you had was Ramsay and Joffrey. I said both show sociopathic tendencies. They get a joy out of it. There's a disconnect. Yes, Daenerys is the breaker of chains, and she can show actual compassion. But there's also a joy that she gets from passing judgment. Ned Stark wasn't smiling as he took someone's head. Tyrion wasn't smiling as Stannis' fleet exploded. He was actually horrified by what he did. So we're not treating her different. All I was doing was saying that her family has a history of mental illness. She's demonstrating some of the same traits, some of the same symptoms. I don't think I'm treating her any differently. If there was a male character like the 2 I've given as an example of, who got joy out of inflicting pain or enjoyed watching people suffer, I would have said them as well.
Now, I'm probably going to regret this, but I do feel that in this season, Daenerys will be doubted by the audience and then redeem herself in some way and become the hero of the show. Probably very wrong on that. I don't think that she necessarily is mad, but in the examples you offered, you did mention Stannis as well. And I would say that Stannis doesn't have a pyromaniac's obsession with fire. That's not his madness, but certainly his obsession with duty and protocol and victory and prophecy led him to do some really fucked up shit. And yeah, I'd say he was a crazy person. He sacrificed his daughter to a priestess and ended up dying anyway. I mean, do you remember when everyone was standing around with Sir Davos and they were pulling a sword out of a fire to fulfill a prophecy. That's what crazy people do.
Yeah, the beach party, the bonfires. Oops, guess what? Melisandre's like, I'm wrong. Sorry. My bad, guys. Sorry.
And listener Chris Kasmerick wrote in and said, hey, guys, could Melisandre's prophecy for Arya be referring to Daenerys instead of Cersei? I believe they both have green eyes. Just a thought, with the rift between Daenerys and the Starks, I could see this maybe being a twist at the end of the show. Enjoy the podcast. Thanks, Chris Kasmerick.
Wow, I can't believe this just popped into my head. We do a movie podcast, 80s and 90s movies called Chat the Movies. And one of the movies we did, Big Trouble in Little China. One of the facts I learned from that, because they were talking about finding the green-eyed bride, was that surprisingly only 4% of human beings have green eyes. So it is rare.
Even more rare is the fact that Targaryens typically have like purple eyes, like violet eyes in the books, white hair and violet eyes. So they might be capitalizing on the fact that Emilia Clarke does have green eyes, because if they said purple eyes, that's a pretty big giveaway.
Yeah.
Another big topic this week was who will end up on the Iron Throne, and I think that'll be a topic for the remainder of the season. Listener Vin G wrote in about that and said, the line of succession for the Iron Throne is dependent on which monarch you choose to follow succession on. The Jon or Aegon and Daenerys claim is based on the Mad King's line of succession. But for much of the show, we've had Robert Baratheon's heirs all trying to stake their claim. With Daenerys legitimizing Gendry, is he the true heir to the Iron Throne when following Robert's line of succession? I could definitely see a scenario where Daenerys is killed and Jon and Gendry are left to figure it out. As we know, Jon has never wanted this, and I'd find it completely plausible for him to give Gendry a heartfelt speech about him being the rightful ruler. You are the legitimate son of King Robert Baratheon and the true ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, etc., etc. This is an interesting one because we took Gendry becoming a lord as a way to give us warm fuzzies about a character that we like, and maybe a political move by Daenerys to gain a faithful lord in the South. If this ends up backfiring and Gendry ends up taking the throne, it would be some pretty sweet irony.
Yeah, and the only way this actually takes effect is if Daenerys actually takes the Iron Throne. If Daenerys is defeated, Gendry is not legitimate anymore. She wasn't the queen, so he goes back to hammer and steel and telling his friend, shit, I was once a lord.
And listener Bryce wrote in about Varys. He says, you remember in season 2 when Littlefinger and Varys are having a makeshift game of wits in the throne room at King's Landing? Varys says, I must be the only man who doesn't want to sit on the Iron Throne. We're led to believe he truly doesn't want it until season 4. In season 4, he's speaking with Oberyn Martell before Tyrion's trial. Oberyn asks about his interest, and Lord Varys stares straight at the Iron Throne and back to Oberyn. Later on, after Oberyn's head weighed a few pounds less, Varys forged an alliance with the Sand Snakes. You know, the Martells, the only house that ever repelled Aegon hundreds of years ago and was cheated the most in Robert's rebellion. Not to mention, Daenerys does not have an heir. Jon is the only other Targaryen with a claim, but we all know how Starks fare in the South, just as Varys knows. He is waiting as the patient spider that he has always been, and he is playing Tyrion out of his job by telling him. When Tyrion tells Dany she won't believe him because of all the misfortunes he had brought her single-handedly, he is my new bet for sitting upon the Iron Throne. However, his reign will not be long. That comes from Bryce.
So I thought also there could be another option here. They could be questioning. Let's say that Daenerys and Varys are still tight. They're questioning, how is Tyrion wrong so many times? Is he the spy? Is he going to turn on us? Varys could be floating the idea of killing Daenerys as a way to bait the true intention of Tyrion. If Tyrion is playing her and these mistakes are calculated and not just actual blunders, this would be a great way to find out what's going on with Tyrion.
And another aspect of that is we assume that because Tyrion's ideas are failing, he might be the spy, that he's setting them up to fail, like a saboteur. Mm-hmm. It could be that Tyrion's having good plans and a spy is leaking those plans, which makes him look bad because everything he thinks of, he's like, how the fuck did they know? Although still hiding in the crypts, that's just bad on Tyrion.
I'm just actually happy that I'm not going to have to wait like 3 years to figure this out. As much as it sucks that the show's ending, at least we're going to get an answer, hopefully here in a couple of weeks.
God, if they go full Sopranos on you, though, you're going to be pissed.
Fuck. The world's going to be pissed.
Speaking of pissed, a lot of people wrote in about the romance between Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth, starting with Sage L. Weatherford, who wrote in, Jaime's character is so relatable for most viewers and readers because more than any other character on the show, his arc reveals a realistic, casual path to redemption away from the fantastic and epic. When he's sitting in front of the fire in that scene and he glances back at Brienne before leaving, it was clear to me that he saw in her everything he could have been, everything he should have been as not just a knight, but as a basic human being. In Brienne, all he would ever see is a mirror of his failures, and her presence and purity of character turns the volume knob on those memories to full blast. He realizes that he's been party to too much suffering in his life, that there can be no fairy tale ending in store for him, and that the better he becomes as a person, the less he can forgive himself for the things he's done. His harsh way of dealing with Brienne had a purpose. He didn't want her to follow him into the abyss, and he had to sever their ties sufficiently to keep her away from the carnage that is coming. He knows he is the only one left who can get close to Cersei, and there's no chance of Brienne surviving that journey behind him as he gets closer and closer to the heart of evil in his twin sister. The great tragedy of it is that despite how close he came to finding a new life on the right path, Jaime's not getting out of this alive, and he really doesn't want to, though he may feel like a fool for believing for a moment he could have. He's coming for Cersei with a clear mind and nothing left to lose, and like a proper twin, he will end with her. Best, Sage L. Weatherford.
So Sage, I like that. I like that he sees what he could have been in Brienne. But also I think it's just the fact that he has a respect and love for Brienne, that he doesn't want to bring her down. He knows he's not the man she thinks he is. Every time she says, you're a good man, deep inside, he knows he's not. Maybe he's trying to redeem himself, but I don't know that you ever can come back from paralyzing a kid as you're sleeping with your sister.
I started this season by saying people go too easy on Jaime, that I was surprised that people were so willing to accept him as some sort of a heroic figure after all that he had done. The brilliance of the writing and his development as a character is he is the most believable redemption arc in the sense that he may not complete that redemption arc. And I absolutely see the texture and the subtlety in this performance and in this character, where despite the entire audience perhaps forgiving him, despite everybody around him forgiving him, the only way that I could see true value in Jaime is that he will never forgive himself. And that shows that he has truly completed that self-realization.
Yeah, I think we have to remember that Jaime has fooled himself for most of the show. He doesn't believe the things that he's doing are wrong. There's the conversation he has with Tyrion as they're prepping for war in Winterfell, where he says, well, Cersei had us fooled. And Tyrion says, no, she didn't fool you. You've always known who she was. You've always known she's terrible. And for that moment, Jaime has to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, he always knew who she was and she was okay with it. And maybe he realizes in that moment, he's equal the monster that she is. And he's finally going to take some ownership. And if it costs him his life, he's going to do whatever it takes to make it right.
Now, listener Susan had a very different take on this entire exchange. She says, I really want to comment on the Jaime and Brienne thing. I don't believe it for a second. I didn't experience any rumblings of will they, won't they, and then all of a sudden Jaime is cock-blocking Tormund Giantsbane and following after Brienne? No. And it gets worse with Brienne crying when he's leaving. I can understand if it's along the line of Brienne caring about Jaime and not wanting him to believe he is a bad person, and that might be part of it. But it takes Brienne from having a life goal achieved of being knighted and being a badass fighter protector to reducing her to another woman crying that a man just slept with her and is choosing something else. It felt like a soap opera and not believable. Anyway, thanks so much for the podcast. Gene, I love that you cry so much. And Big D, I liked your military analysis. Best, Susan.
Thank you. Since, Gene, you like to cry, why don't you take this one?
There were a lot of women disempowered in this episode, and that was a part of the exchange between Brienne and Jaime that I hated, was seeing her heartbroken, seeing her hurt like that. And a lot of people wrote in and said, is it weird that Brienne crying is the moment of this season that affected me the most emotionally? And it's not weird, because as soon as Jaime showed up in her bedroom and she didn't refuse his advances, I already knew this was going to end poorly. I was like, no, Brienne, don't do it. But she is still convinced that he's a good person, even though he did this horrible thing to her right then and there. So I don't know. For me, it was some of the most in-depth exploration of emotion the show has done.
Simone, my only problem with it is Brienne has always been so stoic. She's always been one of the strongest characters. She's unflappable. I don't believe she would have let herself cry out in the middle of the courtyard in her robe. It would have been a more realistic scene if Jaime walks out on her and she's tough. That exterior is still there. He leaves and then she kind of sits down and you see her to herself break. But out in public, I don't believe that Brienne would have done that.
Especially in a house coat.
No way.
All right. Thanks for writing in. Next up, we have one from Colo Dawn, who's writing in about Missandei. And I was surprised with how few emails came in about Missandei, but the people who did write in wrote very heartfelt and well thought out emails. And the first one comes from Colo Dawn. And Colo Dawn writes in, Missandei represented a kind of purity of spirit that is rare in this show. She has suffered under slavery and with her freedom chose to serve her queen with her impeccable mastery of the spoken word. She made it possible for Daenerys to effectively communicate with her own people. She dedicated her life to being a bridge between cultures. She dared to love the unlovable, Grey Worm of the unsullied, nameless, faceless, mindless, child-murdering killers, taught suffering and cruelty as long as he had known himself, mutilated and inhumanly stoic. She was the birth of emotion in him. He learned why life is precious. She taught him love, and in so doing, also taught him fear. She taught him what it means to be human. She taught him the common tongue, and we watched and listened as he improved, a reflection of her excellence as an educator. But she, like Daenerys, doesn't belong in Westeros. She did not like Westeros. She saw no home there. She saw the cruelty of the masters all over again in Westeros. Westeros, where slavery had been proudly eradicated long ago, she would be chained once again, and she would die that way. All this time, she has been a pacifist, a peaceful person from a peaceful culture. She has shown her disdain for the masters in very muted tones until now, but in her final moments, the injustice, the anger, the loss of hope was the birth of rage in Missandei. The only joke she knew was about a translator on a sinking ship who can shout for help in 19 languages but can't swim to save their own life. Amidst the failure of communication to resolve conflict, she, the linguist, would be the first to die, the death of diplomacy. She defined this moment in Westerosi history. It was the moment when Missandei of Nath, at the very end, finally said, "No more," and chose violence. Her last words were the last word that would ever pass between these deadly adversaries, the correct High Valyrian pronunciation of Dracarys. R.I.P. Missandei, Season 3, Episode 1 through Season 8, Episode 4, a true professional. And that comes from Colo Dawn.
Man, now I feel guilty. I feel like I should have felt sad. Like there hasn't been any outcry about people missing her, and we probably should have. After reading this obituary, I feel guilty.
It was a moving moment, that Dracarys, and I was surprised that more people didn't take note of it. It was the fact that there was that pregnant pause. What is she going to say? What is she going to say? Cersei gives her the opportunity to say the last thing. And she doesn't call out to Grey Worm, her love, and she doesn't call out to Daenerys, her queen, and she doesn't call out for mercy. She's like, burn the whole fucking thing down. She's done. Another listener wrote in mourning of a different kind. It was Johnny from Sweden. Johnny wrote in, I noticed your pod took some heat last week, and your pod wasn't the only one, so don't take it personally. I'm absolutely convinced that we fans collectively went into some kind of shock when the Night King died. The fucker actually died. All of a sudden, our theories weren't worth a damn, and we began to realize that this is actually the end, and we're in mourning. Now, the first step in the mourning process is denial, which clearly is seen in all the comments from fans who demanded the Night King back. The second is anger, which has been marked by all the aggressiveness that is directed at all the podcasts. People are angry at everything. I really hope we'll be promised a Game of Thrones spinoff soon. Otherwise, we fans probably will die inside. And that comes from Johnny in Sweden.
Yeah, there has been a lot of anger, and it seems like it's aimed indiscriminately. It's aimed at podcasts, magazines, articles, the actors, the production, the crew. There's really nobody who's managed to dodge all of the flack.
One of my friends, Ray Noriega, he actually was on Facebook today, and someone said that they were just starting up Game of Thrones and they were hoping to get it done before the season ends. You know, they were going to start watching from episode 1. And Ray was like, don't bother. It's garbage. I'm like, you're saying the entire series is garbage based on 4 episodes of season 8? Come on.
Yeah.
Next up, we have one from a longtime listener, Chago, who is writing in some lukewarm takes. He says, I want to address 2 things, and I get it if you don't air them on the podcast because some listeners have been complaining about the negativity. The first is the Sansa line about the path she took leading to who she is now. I have some lady friends who got very upset with that, saying that it romanticized rape. I did not think about that at first, but I do agree with them. Also, the whole Ramsay-Sansa arc served only to make Sansa have something extra personal in order to invest in Ramsay's defeat, while showcasing how evil Ramsay was. Her greatest weapon now, which is her cunning, came from the Littlefinger internship, which by itself was pretty problematic and abusive. In my opinion, the Ramsay-Sansa arc did nothing for the plot. I know Carrie isn't a host of On the Throne, but I'd like her opinion on the idea behind Sansa's line to the Hound, if possible.
So I've thought about this a lot, and you and I had the discussion, whether or not was it appropriate for Sansa's take, or what was accomplished by all of the abuse she's taken, that it now makes her stronger. And then I started to think back to Theon. Yes, Sansa was brutalized, but I think that Theon's right up there with her. He was castrated multiple times. He was broken. He lost who he was. He was taken to a place that I don't even think Sansa was. And what was the reason for that? Was it in the end that I could say, was it just to realize the true value of family and who his family was? What good came out of Theon's abuse? It's a fair question in line with this.
And I think the difference is with characters like Theon and Daenerys, you see the abuse and the mutilation and the sexual attacks on them. They are scarred by it. Theon will never fully shake Reek. That's a part of him. His stature changes. His appearance changes. Daenerys will always have her experiences when she was sold off to the Dothraki with her, and it shapes who she is as a person. I think the grievance that a lot of people have with the Sansa arc is that we're not seeing those differences in who she is as a result of the abuse. We might have seen some tinges of it, but essentially she is saying as a character that she is made better by the abuse that was given to her, as opposed to saying she was better despite the abuse that she took. She was strong all along. That was always within her. It was just unearthed by these experiences. But I think people thought it was just an irresponsible line to throw out there from the writers, and showed a very, very cisgendered male viewpoint of Sansa's development.
Yeah, there was no point where Theon was like, whew, thank God I got castrated. I never realized how much I loved the Starks. That would be the parallel. So yeah, I got that.
All right. Thanks, Chago, for your email. Next up, we have some tinfoil from Ash Schlafly. And she's writing in a bit of an addendum to Big D's explanation of the Golden Company from the deep dive. Ash writes in the series, we have 2 confirmed Targaryens, Daenerys and Jon, that the Golden Company could flip for at any time. Further, though, there is one last wow moment that may happen and confirm a fan theory about Lord Varys. Have you noticed that Varys is one of the characters with the least amount of backstory? Sure, we know how he became a eunuch, but that's it. That's where the tinfoil starts, where some believe that Lord Varys is a Blackfire. So who are the Blackfires? Well, they're a branch of the Targaryens who were bastard born. They are the founders of the Golden Company in Essos. The male heirs of the Blackfires are believed to all be deceased, but maybe not. Perhaps Varys is one. He does shave his head after all, which in the books would be important because Targaryens all have such beautiful white hair. Further, he was chosen as the sacrifice in a ritual of blood magic that took his manhood, and king's blood, or royal blood, is preferred for these kinds of things. I will say that I would love to see Varys be one of the more important pieces of the story. Maybe he'll end up on the throne. I could be okay with that. I do believe him that he's there for the people, that he wants to prevent his family from doing what the Mad King did all over again. And it comes from Ash Schlafly.
Man, I'll tell you, if Varys in the end does turn out to be a Targaryen, he's going to put Littlefinger to shame. We all think he's the master. If Varys has been playing this long con through 6 or 7 leaders, he did it right under Littlefinger's nose. This would be a masterstroke.
Yeah, most of the emails that we get in about secret Targaryens tend to focus on Tyrion. Like, oh, Tyrion's got to be a Targaryen. I don't like that theory at all, mainly because of the fact that we know Tyrion's mother died in childbirth. So why would Tywin Lannister, who hates Targaryens, want to raise the child of a Targaryen that wasn't his? He only has Tyrion around because he's blood, and that's about it. Tywin won't turn on his own family in that way, but he certainly would execute a Targaryen child.
Well, there's a possibility. You know, there were rumors about Joanna Lannister's infidelity. She could still have given birth and died in childbirth, but been the product of a Targaryen affair.
That might explain why Tyrion's hair color and beard color changed throughout the seasons.
He gets those nice frosted tips now.
He does.
In season 8, it's like a Jerry curl. It's like 2 shades lighter. It's like a boy band.
All right, thanks, Ash. Next up, we have one from Brian in Western New York. He says, why is it we don't get to see Sansa and Arya's reaction to Jon's true parentage? Could we have spent an extra minute or two to see that play out? The show seems to be leading us on hard that Jon and Dany are going to be against each other in episode 6, and I'm sure it will be a heartbreaker. I can't wait for this all to play out, and I'll be sure to subscribe to your Westworld podcast for next year. For the throne, Brian in Western New York.
I agree. You know, we've been waiting. This secret has been going on for so long. And can you imagine their reaction? They both would have been like, shut the fuck up. This isn't true. Who told you this? And then Bran's like, yep, I saw it in a vision. Well, what else? Sam will be like, yeah, I read it in a book. Bullshit. Can you imagine if your brother or sister came and told you some big secret? That reaction would have been key. We would know what Sansa was thinking. We would know what Arya was thinking. And that's important to us figuring out the next 2 episodes. What's their intention? How did they take the news?
Now, prior to this season, I would have said that anything happening off camera was intentional, right? So, like, we don't see the Blackfish die. It's just reported that he died. I'm like, that's suspicious. But this season, we've seen things like, hey, we'll see you in Dragonstone. We're going to march to White Harbor now. And they skip White Harbor entirely. Now we're just on boats. It's like, okay, cool. Okay, so now things are getting cut out. And it is interesting that they cut that part out. So it could be one of 2 things. One is we don't know what Bran actually said, because you have Jon Snow saying, like, tell him, Bran.
Yeah.
And then it just cuts away. We don't know exactly what he says. So there might be more to it there. But also there has been some questionable editing in season 8. So it might just be a victim of them saying, let's cut to the next thing. We got to shoot some dragons down. Thanks, Brian, for writing in. Next up, we have one from Hunter Fireball, who writes in, Big D and Shat podcast gurus. I just want to say that the military analysis in your Battle of Winterfell podcast was truly masterful. As a West Point graduate, engineer, officer, and experienced task force engineer in engagement area development, I was blown away by your research and doctrinal correct analysis. I had many of the same criticisms as I was watching this, and I appreciate your actually moments. I plan on using this podcast and the episode as a fun example for some LPD for new engineer officers and NCOs. Big D, I appreciate you as a fellow Sapper graduate. SLTW. Keep up the good work, guys. Hunter F. And a bunch of shit I don't understand.
Yes, thank you, Hunter. A lot of credit goes to the research that we do. And I mentioned it in last week's Small Council that, Angry Staff Officer had done that Wired article. And then there was another one that we had done about medieval sieges. So my limited information only goes so far, but like any good leader, you go out there and you take information from those around you who are knowledgeable. So I appreciate it. And I'm flattered to know that our little podcast could actually be part of teaching some of the future leaders in the U.S. military.
Thanks, Hunter, for writing in, and shout out to the 101st Airborne Division. Thanks for all you do.
Air assault.
Next up, we have one from all the way from Sydney, Australia. It's Daniel, who writes in, this episode had decidedly mixed reviews, but what I couldn't help but notice was the clear theme of female disempowerment in this episode. We have Daenerys getting increasingly isolated and questioned both publicly and privately. Is her sanity intact? There's Brienne of Tarth, a formerly celibate warrior and badass who surrenders this status in a blubbering mess to Jaime Lannister. Sansa, who was overruled by Jon, losing the northern troops and her guest, Jaime. And who could forget Missandei, lost at sea and then executed submissively. The last of the Starks and the only remaining empowered woman is Arya, the slayer of the Night King and hero of the North. I couldn't help but notice parallels to World War II and the opportunities women had to step up when things were bad, but how quickly the power was taken away when the primary conflict was over. Will Game of Thrones keep the ladies down, or will someone rise up against custom and history? Thanks and love the pod, Daniel from Sydney, Australia.
So, Daniel, I can already tell I'm going to wander into some dangerous territory here. As a white man, I know I don't have much claim, or I really shouldn't be talking about this topic of female empowerment, but let's just take some perspective. Season 1, it was all male leadership, and the women were on screen mostly as prostitutes. They were naked. There was large sex scenes in the brothels with Tyrion. We are now at a point where Cersei is the queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Daenerys is her main opponent and trying to retake the throne. Arya just killed she killed death, the most feared character in the entire book. The men have been incompetent, if anything, in season 8. So yes, maybe they've taken a hit in the last episode, but your 3 main badasses are all women.
It's a very good point, Big D. And in fact, I would argue that this episode was trying to show the good guys losing their advantages, and the advantages happened to be in the hands of women. So Daenerys suffered great loss. Brienne suffered great loss. Sansa's just getting the short end of the stick on this one, but the point being is that it may not be a direct shot at women for being women, but rather that they are kind of in the leadership of the good guys, and the good guys are supposed to lose a lot this episode. I do agree, though, in general, that I did feel that upon first watching it. So from an emotional perspective, I got a gut feeling of that too, where I was like, man, why are they weakening all these female characters? I just don't know that's the case. And to get back to what Thiago wrote in about, I wanted to talk to Carrie about this, but the thing is, Carrie's only on season 1. She's gone back to season 1, episode 1, because she's still lost. She's got the map out. She's looking for directions. So she didn't not want to be included in the conversation because she doesn't want to know what happens. Thanks, Daniel, for writing in. Very thoughtful email. Next up, we have one that everyone's been waiting for. It's Tom from Chicago with his SWOT analysis of King's Landing battle opponents. He says, guys, I preferred this week's episode over last week's battle. Good political intrigue is a lot harder to do than action, and Game of Thrones does the game the best. Give me the strategy over tactics anytime. As part of my regular job, I do a lot of decision making, and one way to evaluate different alternatives is doing a SWOT analysis. This focuses on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for a particular action, alternative, or market or product. I applied this to the King's Landing battle opponents, and my analysis is attached. As always, thank you for a great Game of Thrones coverage, and I promise not to burn you when your watch is done. Best, Tom from Chicago. So Tom has attached a beautiful SWOT analysis, which has, it's broken down. The title is Battle of King's Landing Opponents, SWOT Analysis. And the top half is Team Jon and Dany. The bottom half is Team Cersei. And the strengths and weaknesses are listed in green and red. So we'll start with Team Jon and Dany. And under strengths, he has one big-ass dragon. This asset would be most successfully used as a psychological versus a physical weapon. One could reference how Genghis Khan in the 12th or 13th century CE used fear to force cities to surrender by demonstrating the consequences of them not doing so. Used Drogon to destroy Euron's fleet at anchor in Blackwater Bay during the night so as to use the Cloak of Darkness to protect him from the effective Scorpion attack. Also, doing such an attack at night will maximize the visual effect of Dragonfire for the common folk watching from King's Landing. Under opportunities for Team Jon and Dany, he has time. Cersei has 1 million people to feed. Destroy Euron's fleet and you take away the only means of resupplying King's Landing. The hunger-crazed mob in the city will take care of the rest. Under weaknesses for Team Jon and Dany, he says troops, number of and condition. Their forces are tired, as Sansa pointed out, and significantly reduced. This will impact morale and effectiveness. And under threats to Team Jon and Dany, he has time. Dany is already paranoid, and that will only get worse with time due to, 1, Jon is now number 1 bro and had a better claim to the throne, and as Tyrion said, balls do count in Westeros. Number 2, no Missandei and Jorah, the only people she truly trusts, to advise her. And threat number 3, when she finds out about Varys' plot, this will only fuel the paranoia fire. Now, under Team Cersei, the strengths are better strategist. She started with no money and no allies. Now she has a kick-ass fleet, the Iron Bank behind her, and a fresh, highly trained professional army in the Golden Company. But admittedly, no elephants. Under opportunities for Team Cersei, it's time. Daenerys is already paranoid, and that will only get worse with time. See details above under Team Dany and Jon. Weaknesses. Now, weaknesses for Team Cersei. He has King's Landing. It is fixed, non-mobile, non-self-sufficient location, which can be attacked by a dragon with, as Tyrion pointed out, 1 million people who hate her already. And under threats to Team Cersei, we also have time. Euron must be thinking about, how does Tyrion know about the prince that he put in Cersei's belly? Number 2, the people of the city. And number 3, Arya and Jaime on their missions to stop her. So then, as a analysis of all of this, he says the likely approach to battle. Daenerys agrees to the siege approach, but gives a demo of the dragon's power by lighting up Euron's fleet at anchor in Blackwater Bay. Cersei will apply the tactics used by Vercingetorix, the leader of the Gauls, the people who lived in France and Belgium in ancient times, at the Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE against Julius Caesar. In this scenario, the Dany and Jon forces will surround King's Landing, but will in turn be surrounded by the Golden Company, who are already outside the city. Therefore, Dany and Jon will have a two-front battle on their hands. Caesar was able to overcome the situation, but Dany and Jon are no Caesar. At the same time, Arya or Jaime will kill Cersei, so again, the good guys effectively lose the battle, but win the war. But who should be the winner? Cersei. She played the better strategic game. And that bit of madness was brought to us by Tom in Chicago. People have written in wanting to see it. Definitely go check it out on Shout on TV.
Again, this is the example of why the podcast is doing God's work. Who does Tom talk to on Mondays at the water cooler? If he pulls this shit out at work, Tom's getting fired.
I got the feeling that Tom's like one of those C-level guys, though, so he can do whatever the fuck he wants, and everyone's just going to be like, brilliant. Like, he's probably got a role like chief marketing officer, or no, chief transformation officer. That's what Tom does.
I'm surprised his secretary didn't write this up.
I mean, with the typos, maybe he did.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Tom, for writing in, as always. Next up, we have one from Ashley Davis, who says, good morning, hosts. I heard at the end of your podcast, you said that you get some voicemails that are pretty weird. Because I love stuff like that and would love to hear them, I have an idea for you. How about after episode 8 is over, you release a blooper, honorable mentions, dishonorable mentions episode of some sort, where we could listen to a compilation of the craziest, most laugh out loud tinfoil voicemails. I would love to hear it and don't think I'm the only one. Rest up and get ready for Sunday. Ashley D.
So Ashley D, a lot of times when we get the crazy voicemails or the funny bloopers, we're going so fast to produce, to get it out and to get it edited, that we don't always save it. But you made me think of something we could possibly use this for. At the end of season 7, we had the inaugural Game of Thrones season 7 Thronies. And these are Shout on TV specific categories where we got everybody to vote on. Categories were like best hero, best villain, best performance by a non-human. Other categories were fans' biggest gripe, best battle, best sex scene, best character to date your sister. And that's a small sample of the categories we had. So they're very diverse. I think that we should solicit some categories, Gene. What do you think for this year's Thronies?
I think it's a great idea, Big D. We'll come up with a way to let everybody put in their ideas for categories, and then I can go ahead and do the write-up. We'll put that out and have everybody vote like we did last season. It was a lot of fun. I think people enjoy it again. And Ashley, maybe if the listeners do want to hear it, they can add that into one of the categories, the best tinfoil or the best voicemail. I'd love to share that as well. Now comes the point in the podcast where we get to the actuallys. The actuallys are your way of telling us we screwed something up. And sometimes it's your way of telling the show it screwed something up, because I doubt people at HBO are reading your emails. If you'd like to send an actually to us, just go ahead and write in host@shoutontv.com with actually in the subject line so we can identify it, or tweet at us with hashtag actually. The first one comes from listener Greg, who says, guys, my wife and I love the podcast, but we have a big old actually for Big D. In the most recent podcast, Big D says Jon betrayed Daenerys by breaking his promise and telling his siblings about his true parentage. Big D might want to rewatch the scene between Daenerys and Jon again. Actually, he clearly tells her that he is going to tell Sansa and Arya. He never promises or even intimates that he will keep a secret from the Stark sisters. Sorry, Big D, but there was no betrayal here.
So Greg, let's just say that, you're having a little bit of money problems. you like to gamble. And, your wife says, Greg, come on, we can't go to the casino. We can't bet anymore. And you just say, yeah, okay, I know. I'm going to try not to go. And then, Greg, you get up, you go to the casino, you don't have any money. Guess what? You didn't exactly lie, but you still betrayed her. She came to you and said, we need this. We can't do this. It's like somebody who has a drinking problem. If you acknowledge you have a drinking problem and somebody catches you drinking, simply the fact that you didn't say, oh, I didn't promise I was going to drink again, it's still a betrayal of that trust. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, it's like when you start sleeping with somebody, but she's not really your girlfriend yet. So then you sleep with somebody else, but you're like, you cheated on her? Well, no, she's not my girlfriend, technically. Yeah, but does she know you're fucking other people? You cheated. That's cheating. Not you specifically, Greg. This is everybody.
Oh, great. Now Greg's wife knows. What are you doing?
Sorry, Greg.
Oh.
I wish I could quit you. Next up, we have one from Helen from Georgia, who writes in, I have a soft actually, since it wasn't really an error you said, but in my opinion, a blatant misinterpretation. When Tyrion guesses that Brienne is a virgin, Big D interpreted Pod's swig of his own drink to be sort of a confession to being a virgin as well. Actually, I felt it was a mildly comedic moment. Pod takes that drink because he has seen Brienne's wrath and is bracing himself for what will come from Tyrion's guess about something very personal and a subject which clearly embarrasses Brienne. Also, if you look in the background later on when Sansa and the Hound are talking, you'll see Pod talking with two women and leading them out of the room, all smiling. I don't know about you guys, but I highly doubt they're being led away for a private concert. And that comes from Helen from Georgia.
Okay, so I think you're right in this. So there's no definitive answer, even though there was a behind the scenes where they were interviewing the actor who plays Podrick. And he mentions that Podrick's been known since he was introduced that he had some prowess in the bedroom. So he didn't say, like, this is a big reveal that he was not. But then I got a DM in Twitter, and one of our followers said, Big D, there's other ways than vaginal intercourse to please a woman. And we know that Podrick is great with his mouth and tongue. That could have been what's going on. So either one's possible, but Podrick did willingly go with those two women like it wasn't his first time. So I don't think we're ever going to get a definitive answer, but whatever it is, Podrick seems to make the ladies happy.
We got another soft actually on YouTube where someone wrote in and said, Podrick the tripod, what kind of a nickname is that? Wouldn't it be Tripodrick? They're very upset with you, Big D, for not being more clever with the nickname. And I was like, we don't make up the nicknames.
I didn't. It's
not like we sit down on Saturday, the day before the show airs and be like, all right, what nicknames are we going to assign to these characters? I don't think we made up a single nickname on this podcast.
You still got 2 episodes.
All right. Also, for anybody listening, we're not being literal with the jetpacking. Apparently, Carrie was confused by that as well.
No, she didn't.
She thought there was jetpacks.
Well, like it was the Rocketeer?
Yeah. All right. And finally, we have an actually from Marielle. She says, hey, Big D and Gene. So 2 weeks ago when you introduced my voicemail, you messed up my name. It's not Maria. It's Marielle. I know I'm Mexican and Maria is common, but Come on, guys. Also, a mini actually. I called Arya being the secret weapon in my voicemail. Give me some credit. Yeah, maybe I said she was going to be faceless, but still... Keep it up. Gracias. Best, Marielle.
Okay, so Marielle, first, the Google translation of the voicemails, it called you Mario. So me calling you Maria is much better. But the audio quality in the beginning of your call wasn't great. So I even said to Gene, I'm like, Gene, did she say Maria? What is it? And we couldn't make it out. Yes, it is clearly Marielle, but that's better than Mario. And yes, you deserve some cool internet points for predicting that the secret weapon wasn't going to be that 2-piece dragonglass staff.
Yeah, to be fair, your phone call sounded like it was coming from like a Nogales payphone. Like it was not very clear. It was crackly. And then also recordings just seemed to get worse than that. So in our defense, I think Big D listened to that one about 5 times while recommending it to me. Yeah. Everybody in the podcast listened to your voicemail. All of us thought it was Maria, but maybe there was a little bit of prejudice there.
Yeah, and also, people might not know that sometimes we'll put outtakes after the outro music. If there's something funny that happens, we'll throw it at the very end. I don't think that Marielle should be calling any flags here. She called us with this great take, breaking down the opener of season 8. She calls back like a day later and goes, "Oh, sorry guys. I didn't watch the season 7 finale." So I'm going to call an I'm actually on you, and make sure you're caught up before you call in with a theory.
I mean, thank God nothing actually happened during that episode.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thanks for all the actuallys. Thanks for all the emails. Now we're going to switch over to the voicemails. Big D has curated the best voicemails from the week for us to listen to and respond to. Take it away, Big D.
So our first voicemail comes from Bill from Toronto.
Hey guys, it's Bill in Toronto, and I was listening. Yeah, I know that you're going to be pulling your hair out about the military tactics in this show, and let's first start with Missandei. Yeah, you know, give her a Scottish handshake and sweep the leg. Done and done. When the dragon got shot down, you think she was high enough up there to see a mass of black ships within shooting range of her dragons. And by the way, you're right. Why are you going straight at these guys, or even broadside? Once they hit you, you get out of range, you circle around the side, the back, and I'm pretty sure those things can't pivot back to rearwards, and you could take out the whole fleet from a rear attack. Also, it takes a long time to reload those things. I thought what she was doing was drawing fire, getting them all to fire off, ducking them, and it's like, okay, now I've got 30 seconds before they're going to shoot again. So I can just go in there and sweep them all out. That was what I thought they should do, but I'm not the writer. All right, guys, bye.
For listeners at home who don't know, a Scottish handshake, and this is not my term, I understand that reinforces a stereotype, but a Scottish handshake is a headbutt. So the idea is that Missandei would somehow turn around, headbutt Cersei, wrap her arms around her, and jump off. I feel like this is a show being written by me when I was like 7 with like my He-Man toys. Like this is not what we're watching here. But I totally agree with you, Bill. I wish that I could have you on the pod to just speak for the part of me that can't be on the pod, which is like, oh, come on, just fly the fuck around the backside and torch him. But you can't, because that's not what the show did. Like that's the point. And a lot of us are Monday morning quarterbacking over a war that's happening with a dragon queen riding a dragon through the skies of Westeros and fighting the Iron Fleet. I mean, you know, it's not the show we're watching.
Bill, thank you very much. The next voicemail came from Steve from Allentown.
Hey guys, it's Steve from Allentown, Pennsylvania. Just want to let you know I love the show. I appreciate all the effort you put into it. I want to point out one of the writing techniques that George uses a lot is that we're privy to the character's thought. He'll switch to italics text, and it's the character's thinking, and we're privy to their thoughts. And when Dany is thinking, really frequently, she is questioning, could I be becoming mad? You know, she's reflecting on whatever event happened. And there's a lot of instances when we're privy to her thoughts where she's questioning her own sanity. So again, I love the show. Keeps me sane. Keep up the good work. Thanks, guys. Bye.
I'm so glad you brought up the book thing, because I was trying to figure out, why do I have impressions of characters that aren't necessarily reinforced on screen? Or why can an actor do something very subtle that triggers something big in me? And I think a big part of that is having read the books and seen the way that characters think inside. You feel like you know that person. And so when somebody's like, why are people thinking Daenerys is acting erratically? Well, because in the books, if you look at her inside thoughts, she's questioning that herself. And I do think that Emilia Clarke is doing her best to convey that on screen and doing a good job of it. You know, a lot of people are making memes about the look that she gives as Missandei is executed. And, you know, it's very funny to them. But I thought that this was an actress doing a very good job of showing incredible rage. And the fact that where she is right now, she would love to march, you know, to grab her dragon and attack immediately on King's Landing. But she has to go back, compose herself, get her armies together, hopefully wait for Jon to arrive and coordinate an assault. I thought it was beautifully done. And she's conveying a lot through looks and through body language that is not necessarily being said out loud.
Thank you very much, Steve. The next voicemail didn't leave a name, but he's discussing Ned Stark's ability to keep a secret.
All right, guys, this is Game of Thrones, episode 4, The Last of the Starks. Been listening to the podcast for a while, love it. The only issue I had with Jon telling his sisters was the secret only was basically kept a secret for less than a day. Like, Ned Stark died with a secret. Ned Stark kept the secret to his grave, didn't even tell his wife. His wife basically thought it was completely different of Ned Stark after he came back from the war with Baratheons, because he came back with his baby. And then literally 12 hours later, Sansa has the balls to tell Tyrion, who she knows is just going to basically tell the whole world. Like, Ned Stark wanted that secret kept a secret for obvious reasons. So the betrayal, I think, between the family members is going to come huge, because it's exactly what Dany told Jon, like, don't trust even your family with the secret because it's so large. Obviously, your dad kept it a secret for his whole life and made him look different in his own wife's eyes because of the secret. Look forward to listening to the council, and I will talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, you think how difficult it must have been for Ned to keep that secret. You know, he loved his wife. His family was the most important thing to him in the world. And to have his wife look at him as though he had cheated, he brought home this bastard. And then Catelyn despised Jon for most of the life growing up. She looked at him differently. He was able to do that because he understood the gravity of the secret. And then for Jon to just turn around, Ned would have to be disappointed. He'd be like, Jon, come on, man. I took heat for all those years. What's the benefit right now? You don't need to bring it out.
I'm not so sure about that. Ned Stark's reason for keeping the secret was very, very different. It was a different time. So Ned Stark, let's remember, the reason why he kept the secret was twofold. One is Lyanna Stark told him, don't tell a soul. You can't tell anyone. And so he's keeping his promise to his own sister. But also, he knew that if Jon's true identity were revealed, Robert would have him killed. There's no way that kid survives. Now there's no harm in the sense that if people are going to kill him, they're going to kill him at war. He's a grown man. He's not a child at this point. And I don't see this as betraying the family. Maybe it's a broken promise, true. But think of it this way. It could be that Sansa and Arya, or maybe Sansa just alone, is looking out for Jon. They see their brother or their cousin as a man who is being beguiled and being manipulated by this queen. I mean, look at his body language when they're doing the war council. He's standing between Daenerys and his family. He's on his own side there, and he looks afraid. He looks humbled. He looks small and nervous. And I think a lot of that is the family saying, shit, if he's not going to stand up for himself, we got to do it for him. Because it is a ridiculous ask that Daenerys is making. Basically, hide your entire identity so that I can rule.
Okay, here's the parallel I give. A family, the children discover that dad's having an affair. They find photos of him having sex with someone else. The house sets on fire. Is this the ideal time to break out the photos and go, Mom, look, dad's cheating. The house is on fire. Get out of the house. Survive the burning house. Then you can talk about the marriage. Jon bringing this up right now does no good. What's the point? You're only making Daenerys more paranoid. She's questioning you. Kill Cersei, then sit down. Have a second. Remember who knows this. Bran knows the secret. So you're not the last living soul. Sam's out there as well. It's not going to die with you even if something happens. But come on. And for you to say, well, Robert would have killed him, you don't know what Daenerys is capable of. Anything could happen.
Yeah, but this is classic Game of Thrones. Remember in the early seasons, you've got two Baratheon brothers, both with armies, with a navy, with massive force, and all they got to do is march over to King's Landing, kick the Lannisters out, and reclaim the throne. And what do? One kills the other, and it all goes to shit. It's amazing the way these things work, but that's what makes the story so good.
Yeah, the moral of the story is don't trust even your family. Our final voicemail of this small council for episode 4 comes from Ashley.
Okay, this is Ashley. I've emailed in a couple of times. I'm driving, so I can't email right now. I'm listening to the Instant Cast for Game of Thrones. episode 4.
Safe.
And I just want to go ahead and make some notes. I know I'm short on time, so I made some bullets. The first one I want to talk about is Cersei. So this is one I've actually decided to pause the instant cast and call it. I want to take a step back and think about if Cersei was not a villain to us, if we were on the opposite side and Cersei was our hero and the Game of Thrones show had us rooting for her, and Daenerys was this villain with dragons, we would be celebrating right now. We would be so happy. So I want to just go ahead and give props to the show for having some power moves with Cersei. I'm a big fan of Daenerys, and I'm a longtime fan about Daenerys. I've emailed in defending her, but that was a power move, and I'm going to applaud a power move in battle. Cersei was smart. She is on high ground right now, and she is making smart moves. Bullet 2. Daenerys, I want to talk about, I'm wondering, does being inbred make you crazy? Because as much as I love her, she's starting to act like Joffrey. And Joffrey's the only other inbred character we've seen on this show. And he was a crazy king as well. Also, I think Grey Worm could be done with Daenerys after that one. Because she would not surrender to save Missandei. She wouldn't do it. And Grey Worm watched her not do it. And he loves Missandei, and I just don't know if he'll support her. Number 3, I'm glad they kept Arya true to character when Gendry proposed. She let him down easy. She was nice about it, but she said, I'm not a lady. If she would have smiled and said, yes, I'll marry you, I probably would have gagged, because I love Arya, but she's not a lady, and I'm glad that she stayed true to character. Number 4, Sansa has her head on straight. Nobody sniffs out a crazy girl like your sister, and Jon needs to listen. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of Daenerys, but she's losing it. She is going a little bit crazy. And Sansa, she has a feeling that Jon's gonna die. All of our family members have died when they've gone to, oh my gosh, it's late. Anyway, King's Landing. They've all died, and Jon's the only Stark man who hasn't been there with Bran. Lastly, Jaime, what are you up to? Are you jealous that you heard Euron is fighting for Cersei? Are you trying to protect Brienne with the harsh words to stay in the north? Is he going to kill Cersei? We got to keep out for that character because he's wandered off on his own now. And lastly, Big D, this is for you. Bran was still sitting in a wheelchair in the courtyard.
Oh man! So Ashley got cut off. That would have been perfect for that episode we were just talking about. But Ashley starts off saying, "I can't email because I'm driving," and I'm like, "Oh, Ashley, thank you for being safe." But then she starts referencing a checklist. Is she reading on her phone as she's driving?
Not just the checklist, but also she's in a rush. So she's had to throw it together. So she's in a rush, driving, reading a checklist. Ashley, I'm hoping, this is what I'm imagining though, is that you're driving somewhere where they film True Detective. So you got lots of open road and nothing around that you could possibly hit. No children, no other cars. You don't have to turn for the next 30 miles. And you can take the time to give us a call.
I think that Ashley was one responsible for that Starbucks coffee cup on set. She sounds like she's had a couple of venties.
But this is a very, thorough. I'm glad that you pointed out the whole, sisters can smell out crazy. My sister is great at doing this. She has told me about my breakups years before they happened. She'll meet a person and go, crazy. And they usually are. Although that's kind of my type.
So, Ashley, thank you very much for calling in. And thank you, everybody else, for writing in, calling in. It makes this episode a lot of fun. It's nice to hear from you and get everybody else's thoughts, because this is a team effort. And we wouldn't be able to do this or wouldn't want to do it without the interaction that we have from our listeners and fans of Game of Thrones.
Absolutely. If the Instacast and Deep Dive are the work week, this is like the weekend for us. We can just kick back, have some fun with the audience, let you do the work for once, and just chime in when needed. So that concludes this week's episode of Shout on TV, Game of Thrones. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shout on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shout on TV Podcast. Again, remember, you can read these emails in their entirety on shoutontv.com under the Game of Thrones Small Council. Here we have truncated many of them, almost all of them, for length, but you can read the whole thing there and reply there. I will have a conversation back and forth with you on the website. Again, that's shoutontv.com. If you'd like to email us for the Small Council or just to say hello, email us at host@shoutontv.com. Again, if you are writing in for the Small Council, please have your email in before 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. That allows us to have a cutoff time so we can make sure we have all the emails in and start considering them. Our voicemail, if you'd like to call in, is 914-719-SHAT. And if you'd like to contribute to the podcast with your dollars, you can go to shatontv.com/PayPal/Venmo or /Amazon, depending on your payment format of choice. Also, if you have a few minutes, please take the survey at shatontv.com/survey. That'll allow us to find sponsors that link up with your interests. As a reminder, we're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out all of our other Shout on TV podcasts, including Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, and True Detective. That's all on shatontv.com, and 80s and 90s movies at shatthemovies.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D Dick Ebert, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Sunday for the Season 8, Episode 5 Instacast. Thanks for listening, and go Team Targaryen.